Hello, my name is Jeff Kaczynska, and I'm an electrical engineer. I've been working for over 12 years in different industries, from electrical test and measurement to consumer electronics and military electronics. The Internet of Things is a multidisciplinary field which encompasses a lot of different skill sets, from hardware to embedded firmware to front-end web design, back-end web design, as well as big data technologies. There's a lot of information to cover, so come along with me and I'll be your guide to help you through the big world of the Internet of Things.
So in this course, we're going to talk about how to build a scalable big data IoT web application from scratch. And my major goal in this course is to equip you with the necessary skills you will need to develop a fully functioning IoT web server application that is scalable for big data. And as I mentioned earlier, the Internet of Things requires a lot of different skill sets, and one of those is basic analog and digital electronics. We're going to talk about how each one of these individual components performs a certain function to get real-world signals into digital signals and onto the internet. We're going to talk about basic programming and how to program the different types of hardware that we're going to use in this course. We're talking about data types, loops, arrays, functions, object-oriented programming, classes, inheritance, and extensibility. All this is useful for basic programming, and it's used in almost every language. So once you have this under your belt, you'll have a solid foundation in programming, and it'll be easy to move from one software platform to another one. We're going to talk about Wi-Fi modules and how to use their individual peripheral features, such as the general purpose I/O, the timers, interrupts, the ADCs and the DACs, pulse width modulation and communication, and most importantly, we're going to talk about HTTP messages and requests and responses. That's how information gets sent over the internet, is through HTTP messages, using get, post, put, and delete messages, and some other ones as well. And as a bonus, I'm going to talk about printed circuit board design and schematic capture for designing the circuit, and PCB layout for actually physically placing the components on the board and routing it. I'm going to teach you how to find electronic components and source them using some of the electronics distributors that are out there. And we're going to talk about design rules for designing for manufacturability for PCBs, so that way when you send a board to a third-party house, you know that the board is going to be manufacturable. We're also going to talk about how to export those design files once you have your design ready. And we're talking about stencil fabrication for your surface mount components, and we're talking about just the best practices for PCB layout. Another thing that we're going to talk a lot about is front-end web design. We're going to talk about HTML, which is the basic building blocks for your website. We're going to talk about CSS, which is styling the website. And we're talking about JavaScript, which updates the page after it loads. And we're going to talk about Bootstrap, which is useful for responsive web design, and it encompasses all of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And it's just a useful tool for making sure that whatever device is looking at your web page, it's going to look good. We're going to talk about back-end web design and how it communicates from the front end to the back end using PHP to perform CRUD operations, which are create, read, update, and delete operations on a MySQL database, among other things such as cookies and sessions, authentication, encryption, receiving HTTP messages and responding to those, and also RESTful web services, which are useful for web server applications to talk between each other. And we're also going to talk about how to host your own website, how to manage the files in your file manager, how to create email accounts, and how to create MySQL databases and maintain them. And we're also going to talk about scalability. We're talking about external databases, the relational and non-relational. We're talking about ingestion of data using Apache Kafka or Scoop. That's how to get streaming data into your distributed file system. And we're going to talk about analytics, how to analyze all that data once it's there, and processing the data as it comes in. And once it is there, we can use query engines to execute queries on it or to do data mining. And finally, we're going to take a look at the different platforms that are out there. We're going to take a look at Hadoop, Cloudera, Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, and we're going to talk about the pros and cons between each one of those. So I'm really excited to have you join me in this journey in the Internet of Things, and so I hope you see you later on in the course.